views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BRONXnet or the program underwriters.
Hello and welcome to Art Time with BXArtsFactory, partnered with BRONXnet. My name is Lovie Pignata, and today you'll learn a little about me and how I became an artist, and we'll also work on a project together, Hidden Pictures. Growing up, my family was supported my art, not professionally, more that it was a good hobby and it kept me out of trouble, mostly. But my art teacher, Judy Morgan, encouraged me to enter competitions, some of which I won, and she taught me to be critical of my own work without being disappointed and to be able to continue on. I always thought I wanted to be an artist when I grew up, but that never seemed feasible in my world. But she showed me that there were ways to be an artist and get paid for it, which my family always made it seem like it was a backup plan and not a good one. Growing up, I was inspired by my father's best friend from high school who had gone to Pratt Institute in Brooklyn, and he was an industrial designer. And I remember loving going to his loft and seeing the things he was working on. He was a fairly successful furniture designer and helped design Nerf. He just did, everything he did was cool to me. And he seemed to make a lot of money because he always had big spaces to work in. So as a child growing up, he was like my beacon of light that I could actually make money. So in partner with my art mentor, I started wanting to go to Pratt ever since I was a young child, just because I saw the opportunity it afforded my uncle, or my dad's best friend. Like, that was the only college I wanted to go to, was Pratt. I didn't really think or see any other college in my future. My parents wanted us, my sister and I, both to go to college, but they didn't really assist or show how that was going to happen, especially with art. That didn't seem like a good plan to them. But after high school, I didn't finish high school. I moved out early. I moved around. I moved to Oklahoma. I got married. And I started school at Tulsa Junior College, and I was entered in a few contests there, which I either won or was runner-up. My art teacher there was a little frightened of what I was drawing. A cat with a fish swimming out of its eye. Everything made her uncomfortable that I did, so I felt like I was doing something right by that. And so that one semester of college at 19 allowed me to see that I still wanted to go to Pratt, and that was the answer for me. So I left Oklahoma and moved back to North Carolina. I was just working. I really wasn't working on much art at the time. I always thought creatively, which keeps me sane. And when I was 23, I had just gotten a new old used car. Somebody sideswiped me, and instead of using the money to fix the car, because it was still workable, it just was really ugly, I used the money to buy a plane ticket to go to New York to go to Portfolio Day at Pratt. So I bought the plane ticket. I had no idea where I was going to stay. I just knew that I was going to go and bring my portfolio. I was able to piecemeal a few things together, mostly older work because I wasn't working on much the last few years. So I flew to New York. I ended up staying with a professor that was a friend of my uncle's at the last minute because I really made no plan. And he was also a professor at Pratt. So I went to Portfolio Day. They accepted me based on my portfolio, but I had yet to apply. And when I left, I saw all the prices of how much school was going to be, and it automatically went on a shelf because it wasn't affordable. I had no idea how to get there. A year later, my grandmother died, and my dad called me out of the blue and said, "Do you want to go to Pratt?" So of course I said yes. I sold all my belongings. I gave a cat to each parent to take care of. It was, I sold my car. And on the way up to New York, he told me that he could only pay for the first semester. So he was basically dropping me in New York into a dorm, and I had to get student loans for the remainder of my time there. So I was automatically behind the 8 ball because I hadn't applied for anything. And he had told me he was going to pay for all 4 years. We took a trip up to New York, and he said yes, 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 but he hadn't discussed it with my stepmother, and she had other plans for my college tuition. So that's how I met New York again, after being born here and being away and living in other states. And I did great at Pratt. I really dove into the work, but I also had to work a job or two each semester, and I always had to beg for the last balance of money because I didn't qualify for many scholarships because the money was promised to them in tuition. So I didn't finish school. I left. I had probably a semester and a few credits left. I was assaulted the last semester in school by a boyfriend, and I ended up leaving school and getting a job at an art shipping company. So I stayed in the art world, but behind the scenes and not as an artist. I'm an artist because it's already what I was. It took me many years to peel back what other people wanted me to be or what an artist should be. I've held many jobs, and I think I've done a great job at them, but I never had the passion for them as I do for my artwork. I've done office work, I've done art shipping, I've done logistics. I have a small side business serving coffee. I piecemealed many different jobs together, but artwork and making art and showing other people how to make art or understanding art or seeing it in a different way is just part of who I am. And the more artwork I do, the less I'm able to be in a more conventional setting. I feel like I'm finally becoming who I am, and it took a long time. I moved to the Bronx in 2001 after visiting here once, and I found my apartment. I loved it. I moved there from Brooklyn, the last place I'd lived where I had gone to school at Pratt, and moved to the Bronx because I had a terrible landlord in Brooklyn that was trying to get me out by going in my apartment after I left in the morning to go to work. So I moved to the Bronx. I found a cheap co-op apartment, and I've lived there ever since. I've been there 20 years. I started going on local walking tours and seeing different parks, and I discovered the Bronx River on one of those walking tours, and I got involved with many organizations and going to different free events, mostly in parks and green spaces in the Bronx. So I fell in love with the Bronx River. I live close to it. It often shows up in my work. It's a running theme in my work, whether it's the water, the trees, and I met a historian who told me a lot about the Bronx, Morgan Powell, and I listened to many things that he told us about on the tours, and he always gave a nice recap of all the places we'd gone so that you could look up the organizations he spoke of and do more research on your own. So I really became enthralled with the green spaces in the Bronx and seeing them. I still do a lot of work in parks and am present in parks in different ways, and the nature of the Bronx shows up in a lot of my work, as well as the architecture, and not so much the people, but the people are involved in the artwork as viewers and as participants, not as a figural part of my work. The kind of art that I do shifts according to the project, location, materials available. I like to use found objects, repurpose items, surplus items, and I also like to draw with pen and ink, detailed drawings, lots of layers and lines. So my work varies. If I were to choose one that I would prefer to work in is more of the installation or public art. I like to call it community art because I don't like it to just be an item that you look at. I like it to be interactive, to be used as part of an ongoing living artwork that changes according, based on who's viewing it, based on who's interacting or doing projects or activities around the artwork. Some of the challenges as a Bronx artist is finding work in the Bronx, paid work in the Bronx through organizations, and some of my work includes murals. The most recent was at the Botanical Market on Boston Road in the Bronx, and it's a store that I frequent often. They painted the wall bright chartreuse green, and that's what I used as the base color. But finding work in the Bronx is tricky. I was able to get that project because I knew somebody that worked at the store, and they knew that I painted, and then the owner hired me. So sometimes it's a very simple transaction, but it was also because I'd made connections beforehand that afforded that opportunity. Other times it's just applying for grants, but I feel like a lot of Bronx work goes to artists outside the Bronx, which I guess is a problem everywhere that's becoming gentrified. So some of my work has been found through grants, others through commission, or through a community connection where I knew there was an opportunity. My relationship with BXArtsFactory has been since before it was started. I knew Laura, and I don't think I knew Yolanda yet. But I served coffee at the launch party through my small business, Morris Perk. So I've been involved in so many different ways. I was also their first virtual resident, where I taught for different workshops in people's homes. I taught workshops on projects that parents and caregivers could show to the children. So it was fun to work with them instead of skipping straight to the children. So it was an interesting residency. I really enjoyed that, and it was fun to work with the adults and get them excited about it as though they were children, because they didn't have to deal with the children when we were doing it. So that was in 2016, I think, was the first time I worked as an artist with BXArtsFactory. Creatives and artists are important because they give a different view. They can make light or add depth to a subject with using their artwork, whether it's video, painting, a photograph. I think just seeing other perspectives and, sometimes seeing things in color or seeing things in a different light than is natural draws attention in a way that words can't, or that words can't. Another struggle for Bronx artists is finding space to work. Luckily, on some of my larger projects, I've been able to work directly on site at a park. But for every day or, ongoing projects, to have free space to work, it's hard to find any studio space in the Bronx, especially with rent that's rent-free or in exchange for classes or workshops. So my hope for the future is to find another working space where I can stretch out and work on larger projects than I can in my home studio. Welcome back to Art Time with BXArtsFactory. Now we're going to work on a project called Hidden Pictures. The supplies you'll need for hidden pictures are pretty simple, and I'll offer some replacements. White crayon or a white oil crepa will work. You can also use drippings from a white candle. So that's part number one. You'll also need something, a color. So you can use, I have gouache as a choice. A darker color, yellow and light colors don't work as well. So you could use magic markers. Also brushes. These are Home Depot special, a Home Depot edger. If you don't have a brush of any type, you can always use a Q-tip or a cotton ball and add water. You'll also can use a watercolor paint, and I also have watercolor pastels that dissolve when you add water. Another supply needed is watercolor paper. If you don't have watercolor paper, you can use a cardstock or a heavier, just not a sketch paper, something heavier than a sketch paper. There's many different choices for watercolor paper. If you're gonna send these to somebody, there's watercolor cards that come with envelopes. I'm just using your standard watercolor paper from a pad and taking the white crayon, and you can trace a cookie cutter, you can trace a shape, a stencil, because it's hard to see what you're drawing when you're drawing white on white. So I'll just make some different designs using the white crayon and my stencils. Oh, broken crayon. Hazard. And you can also write notes. You can, I've done this with children where I've written their names and then you'll show them their name at the end. You can mail them as drawings that you can't really see, and then somebody else can paint them. So it's all about making a design. It doesn't really matter what it is. You can write a message, draw something really simple, or you can get more elaborate. So it's really open for anybody to try, because it's just making marks on the paper. Here's some I did ahead. And it takes no painting skill whatsoever to paint this. You can just add a little water. I'm using liquid watercolors right now. And you can see wherever I've written with the crayon, it worked as a resist, and the words are coming up. So it's just a matter of covering the paper. There's really no skill involved in that part. Just more popping up the message underneath. So there's one, my Instagram handle. I Lovie New York. And here's the other one I just drew. I can do this as an example. With the magic marker, you'll get less of a contrast than with the paint, but you'll still get some design underneath. So magic marker is less ideal than the paint, but either will work. And if you don't have a brush, you can use something as simple as a cotton ball dipped in paint. You could use coffee instead of paint, or beet juice. You can really use anything that's water-based that will show the drawing underneath. So now you can see some of the quick pattern I drew underneath is popping up. Switch cotton balls. And darker colors work best, as I mentioned. Sometimes I also draw on top of these, but it's such a simple exercise that it doesn't matter the skill level. You can still get an image that looks really cool and find out what's underneath. And I like using the watercolor cards because you can write a message to somebody and then send it to them, and then they'll have to reveal what you sent them. So if you have to send a secret code to somebody, this is the way to do it, or one of the ways to do it. Super simple one here. Try another one that I drew on. And this is a watercolor brush where you can fill it with water, and you always have water in your brush. Works great for traveling, and it makes less of a mess because you don't have a cup of water to knock over. Not that that's ever happened to me. See, the darker color you use, the more you can pop out the message. Sometimes it's fun just to draw lines with the white crayon. You can't really see what you're drawing unless you tilt the paper, but I like the mystery of it, so I don't go for perfection. Just try to get an image that will be fun to reveal later. This is also a good family activity or a group activity. One person can draw, and then you pass them around or shuffle the cards or shuffle the papers, and then everybody paints their own, and you get to see what somebody else put as a hidden picture. So Hidden Pictures is a really easy project. It's fun to do with the group, to pass them around, to see what somebody else's message was, or to mail them away. But it's fun, it's nice to just get some color and scribble a little bit and give yourself some leeway to enjoy it and not get so serious. Thanks for joining us for today's episode of Art Time with BXArtsFactory and BRONXNet. Stay tuned for further episodes.